welcome back to Can You Beat Kingdom Rush Vengeance with insert tower name here. This time we're doing the Infernal Mages. I was feeling pretty confident going into this video. You know, still riding on the success of the Shadow Archers episode. I thought the Infernal Mages could be a slight step up in difficulty while still keeping things relatively simple. Or at least that's what I thought. The best part about the Infernal Mages is just how much damage they do. This is one of the highest base damaging towers in the game. Also, its abilities allow it to handle many different kinds of troops much better than other magic towers. Going through these first levels was a nice introduction to using the mages. This tower is quite different than the Shadow Archers, but my strategy was essentially the same. Just get a good chunk of low-level towers and then place Varuk right in the front to block the enemies for me. And you're kind of set. I like these early levels because you pretty much always have enough money to fill up all of the tower slots, especially when you're not allowed to upgrade the towers too much. So you just have a bunch of these like baby towers versus all of these super weak enemies coming through. I don't know, just super satisfying. I did lose some lives on the Corridors of the Old City stage, which is the second stage in the game. Kind of embarrassing, but what can you do? I wasn't prepared for how many troops were coming down the stage. So my mages just like couldn't handle that many, and I just kept rushing things constantly, which definitely did not help the situation. So I guess my flawless run was over, but you know, whatever. However, this level was a pretty good indicator of the main weakness of the Infernal Mage Tower, their speed. Infernal Mage Towers excel when they're attacking a single enemy. I mean, just look at all that damage. But when there are multiple weak enemies, a lot of the damage isn't really necessary, so it's kind of wasted. And you might be saying, well, DJ, are you trying to say that the Infernal Mages are bad at crowd control when their Lava Fissure ability is literally designed to handle troops? Okay, good point. Kind of. We'll talk more about the abilities in a little bit, so just hold your horses for now, okay? The following level is Kazan Mines, which I found to be actually even easier than the previous level. This layout is much more friendly to fewer towers, so the name of the game was quality over quantity. I got one mage at a time, upgrading it to max, and then another, and I did the same thing on and on. Piece of cake. And don't forget to click the dudes in the minecart because they will mess you up if you are not careful. I got into a little bit of a flow after this level. It was still a little bit of a juggling act because all of the enemies running around and the introduction of the alchemists, but surely enough, I got through a couple more levels and arrived at my first boss fight. I kind of think Bulgur was designed just to show you how strong wizard towers are. There's so many high armored enemies running around, and my boys could just shred through them. It's pretty fun to watch. My current plan for these levels was to fully upgrade one tower at a time, but I started losing a lot of lives about halfway through this stage because once again, I wasn't prepped for the amount of troops coming down the path, but also I was just like fumbling all of my abilities right here. What was I doing? Look. Not again. I was kind of struggling through these waves. My two upgraded mage towers were not cutting it. Okay, let's think about this. The Infernal Mage Tower is very slow attacking, but deals a significant amount of damage when it's actually able to hit something. But the range of the tower now becomes critical. Upgraded versions of the tower can attack some enemies and kill them in one hit, but weaker versions take 3 or 4 shots. However, upgrading the tower costs much more in the long run than building multiple copies of a tower. Building multiple versions of a tower effectively doubles the attack range and the attack speed of a tower. Not to mention the extra damage you're already getting. And as I mentioned earlier, the biggest problem with the mages is the attack speed. And the only way to increase their attack speed is just by getting more towers. So when dealing with multiple enemies, having many towers is much more beneficial than having a highly upgraded one. But the situation gets even more complex when we consider how abilities and enemy resistances also affect the power of certain towers. Not to mention how some tower locations are not very useful, and it would be better just to upgrade a tower rather than place one in a bad spot. But I digress. Anyways, I limped my way to the final wave and cut him down with relative ease. From this point so far, I had just been using Varuk as my hero. You know, he's a pretty good blocker, especially when I don't have access to other barracks troops. But after beating Mr. Bulger, I earned Olak. Now, normally I wouldn't give much of a second thought to this guy because he's not that good, but I mean, come on. I'm doing an Infernal Mage run, and I get a hero that is an Infernal Mage. I gotta give him a shot, right? I wouldn't say these ice levels were difficult, but I did lose a bunch of lives. Okay, see, there'd be a bunch of these easy waves, right? And I didn't really have to think about it all that much. And then randomly I'd get bombarded with a whole bunch of glacial wolves that are running down the track fast and they have magic resistance. And I just couldn't keep up. The fast-moving enemies got me again. And then it was time for the Apex Stalkers. Yeah. These dudes are everything anti-wizard. They move fast, they kill good, they have magic resistance, and when you actually kill them, a little version of them starts running down the track. These bros were hard for my mages to deal with, to say the least. But, hey, you know, at least they only spawn one little guy when they die. It's not like they constantly spawn these guys or anything. Okay, this is where the run actually got difficult. These last few ice levels have multiple paths you have to manage, and the enemies are just like perfect for battling a whole bunch of slow attacking mages. I was running Olak back and forth along the path and using my abilities like a fiend. Suffice to say, I lost a lot of lives. Okay, it's time to talk about the abilities, because this is when they actually became pretty important. Lava Fissure is the mage's crowd control ability, in which an eruption of magical lava bursts from the ground, dealing damage to all of the enemies in the area.
I mean, it's alright, like...
Infernal Teleport is exactly what you think it is. The tower teleports a group of enemies back up the path.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
And finally, we have Affliction.
The goat! The goat!
Okay, well, it's not that good, but it is certainly the most useful ability for this specific run. Affliction reduces the resistances of enemies in a certain area for a short period of time. On the surface, it doesn't really appear to be that good, right? Like, it only comes out every so often, and the time limit doesn't last very long, and it still relies on towers attacking the targeted enemies. But the ability to reduce resistances in this challenge run is absolutely vital. And when you have a map full of mages with the upgrade, the ability pops pretty often too. Long story short, in all of the last ice levels, I went for that ability pretty much every time. I am very torn about Olak's hero ability. See, without any upgrades, the ability, yeah, it's bad. But once it's upgraded to max, it gets slightly better. I would say the only real saving grace of the ability is that it recharges really fast. So you get to use it all the time, but then also you have to manage the ability, so you have to use it more often too. Instead of having a more powerful ability that you'd use less often, you now have to use this less powerful ability more often, which means you're doing more as a player. See, the teleporting ability did get me out of some tough places occasionally, but it never really solves the problem. It just kind of pushes it for later on, I guess. Oh, good, Olak. Hey, do you mind helping me out with some of these dishes here?
Yeah, I got you, bro.
Oh. Oh, sweet. Nice job. The final level, Jokel's Nest, gave me a lot of trouble. Ice Witches and Apex Stalkers out the wazoo. Not to mention the Frost Giants and Glacial Wolves that are also coming down the path. I feel like I tried this level every which way. A bunch of first level Infernals, then a couple super strong Infernals, then a nice balance of the two. Then I swapped up my tower placement. I tried to stay on top of my abilities as much as possible, but no matter what I did, it just wouldn't cut it. But there must be something. some small factor that I hadn't changed, some minuscule element that I hadn't experimented with yet. Right. As fun as the whole let's only use fire mages thing was, Olok wasn't helping enough. So I swapped him for another mage that could manage the enemies a little bit more efficiently. Mortimer was the missing piece of the puzzle. Like any good necromancer, one of Mortimer's passive abilities is to raise enemies from the dead and use them to fight against their own kind. I cannot tell you how nice it is to have more blockers on the map. They slow the ice witches, they stop the apex stalkers. It just makes a massive difference. I still lost a few lives, but I had much more ability resources to work with. After all of those attempts with Olok, on my second try with Mortimer, I took down the ice dragon. I stayed true to Mortimer on the following levels because his zombies were just too helpful. Otil's farmland is always a nice treat after taking down Jokel's nest, especially for mage towers. I mean, I absolutely destroyed these dudes, easily cutting through waves of physical armor enemies. And actually, the Elven Forest was kind of the same situation. I didn't lose any lives, and it was pretty easy. Well, surely the next level is going to be tough. I mean, it's a wizard town. It's bound to have a whole bunch of magic resistant enemies, right? This one's gotta be tough. But no. It was easy. No lives lost. Then I did Lightseeker Camp, and that one was easy too. I mean, look how fast I killed this guy. And before I knew it, the final level was upon us. I filled every available tower location and still had $100 left to spare. I carefully worked through the level, making sure not to let one enemy past, slowly getting fully upgraded towers one at a time, minus the teleporting upgrade. And without too much trouble, I got to the second part of the level without a single life lost. Am I about to do this perfect on the first try? On the second part of the level, I started again with a full map of level 1 mages, and then selected a few to upgrade in key locations. The enemies came barreling down the track, but they were no match for my mages. I had to cover some exits with my hero and my reinforcements, but it wasn't too much trouble. The cannon explosions weren't a problem this time because I actually remembered that they were coming, so I spread out my money between multiple different towers on the map. I fought wave after wave without losing a single life. The Griffin Riders were really insistent on killing Mortimer, but I did what I could to keep that old dude standing. Probably the scariest enemies on the map were the dogs, just because they ran through my defenses so fast, but I was able to stop them from getting too far. And eventually, I made it to the final wave. Paragons started down the map, but my Infernal mages were ripping them apart. Just look how fast I take these guys down. It was pretty ridiculous. I easily dropped the first two Paragons, and before I knew it, the final guy was down. And we won. Wait a second, that was kind of easy. The hardest level was when I had to beat Jokel's Nest back there. Like that was the final boss for me. Everything after just kind of felt like a victory lap, honestly. I kind of wish this final level brought back enemies from earlier parts of the game. Like, if they brought back Apex Stalkers or like the Alchemist, that probably would have made this much more difficult of a final battle for me. Because the only magic resistant guys in this section of the game are not very hard to deal with. Regardless, I did it. Hooray! Another tower down. I think for the next episode, I might do something a little more weird, you know, a little strange maybe. And I actually haven't figured out how I want to handle towers that are unlocked in later parts of the games, but I'll do a little thinking on that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this episode. All right, bye.